as soon as the record light comes on.
So
Okay,
welcome everyone to this virtual community meeting to discuss NPA 2023-0013.02. If you haven't done so already, please let us know who's here by typing your name in the chat box. If you're associated with an organization, if you could provide that as well. Please mute your microphone if you're joining by phone, and please turn off your video if you're participating online to save bandwidth. This meeting is being recorded and will be publicly posted to the publicinput.com/neighborhood plan amendment cases website. This is the same web link that is in the community meeting notice that you received. If you do not want your image viewed publicly, please turn off your camera.
Maureen, we have a hand raised, so there's a question. We can answer it really quickly, but let's hold off on questions until after the presentation. So Judith Sims, do you have a question? Please unmute and ask it at this time. No, okay. Okay, Maureen, she doesn't unmute and I can't unmute. So, just go ahead, Maureen.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Keep going.
Yes, please.
I didn't have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I just entered my name.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that, Maureen. Go ahead.
Okay. So, as you know, the property is in the Bouldin Creek neighborhood planning area. And here's the case number again, NPA 2023-0013.02. Mark Walters is the meeting facilitator tonight. I am Maureen Meredith. I am the plan amendment case manager. I'm with the planning department, same as Mark. Michael Watson is the zoning case manager. He's with the development services, and this is our contact information on the screen. We'll repeat this slide at the end of the presentation when we get to the next steps. So the agenda tonight, I will go over basic case information, guidelines, group discussion, how to participate in this process, why is there a plan amendment application, what is a future land use map, also called a FLUM. I'll do a brief presentation. Michael Whelan, the applicant's agent, will do a presentation. Then we will open the meeting to the Q&A session. Property address is 700 Dawson Road. It's 3.76 acres. Again, the case number for the NPA is NPA 2023-0013.02. Project name is 700 Dawson Road. The request is to change the future land use map from multifamily residential to mixed use. The associated zoning case number is C14-2023-0064. The proposed zoning change is to go from SF3NP, which is Family Residence District Neighborhood Plan, to CSMUNP, which is General Commercial Services District, Mixed Use Combining District Neighborhood Plan, for a club, lodge, and possibly other uses to be determined. And this is information taken from the plan amendment application. The property owner applicant is Dawson Overlook LLC, Terry and Mark Black. The agent is Michael J. Whelan from Armbruster Brown, PLLC. Guidelines for group discussion. Please feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time during this meeting. Please postpone general comments during the Q&A session. After the staff and applicant presentations, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand symbol in the menu bar. Telephone participants will be able to speak during the Q&A session as well, and we will call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. Attendees will be muted upon arrival and through the staff and applicant presentations. Then staff will open the floor to answer questions in the chat or by attendees raising their hands to speak. Similar questions may be grouped and answered together. If you're having connection issues, please turn off your video until called upon to ask your question, and please be respectful to each other during the meeting discussion. How to participate in this process. As mentioned earlier, the recorded meeting will be posted to the publicinput.com neighborhood plan amendment cases website, and they'll be done tomorrow morning. You can email or call me or Michael with any questions that you have. you provide written comments, we will include them in the staff case reports that go before Planning Commission, City Council. When the cases are scheduled for Planning Commission, City Council, you will get a notice in the mail if you live within 500 feet of the subject tract. The notice will have instructions on how to participate in the public hearings. You can participate both virtually and in person. So why is there a neighborhood plan amendment? Neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council as amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. City Charter requires zoning changes to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Most neighborhood plans are amendments to a plan's future land use map, and most neighborhood plan amendment applications have an associated zoning application. This map shows the areas in blue that have City Council approved neighborhood plans. The neighborhood plans have a plan document that have text that provides the vision and goals for the planning area, and most of which also have a future land use map, which these colors on the future land use map represent broad land uses. For example, the yellow in the map represents single family, the orange multifamily, red commercial, and brown mixed use. So the applicant currently has multifamily land use and request is for mixed use land use. So here's the property in the center of the screen. It is multifamily. Here's an aerial photo. Google map that shows some of the surrounding land uses and businesses. And an aerial photo with the future land use map overlaid. You can see it's orange, and to the east is single family. To the north, you have some recreation, open space, and multifamily. And to the west, there's not a land use, there's no planning area. Here's a zoning map, again, starting to the north, there's some MF3 zoning, to the east, SF3, to the south, SF3, to the west, public, and the property currently has SF3 zoning. This map is the growth concept map from the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan that shows regional centers, town centers, neighborhood centers, and activity corridors. So this map zooms in on the property and where it lies in relation to the activity centers and corridors. You can see South Lamar is an activity corridor. You have to the north in orange, the downtown regional center and South Central waterfront. Excuse me. And here is a map that shows some public transportation in proximity to the property. And that ends my presentation, and we'll go to Michael Whalen.
Thank you. And I think Michael Gaudini, who works with me, is going to pull up presentation. And I thought I'd run through a very short presentation. Some of this is repetitive, but I'll go through it quickly, and then we can obviously be available for questions. So first and foremost, thank you, Maureen, and everybody, all staff, and most importantly, everybody who's joined this evening, neighbors. I'm Michael Whalen on behalf of the applicant, which in this case is the Black family of Terry Black's Barbecue, and I believe Mark Black is on with us and is also going to be here available to answer any questions. We're here to discuss two applications for 700 Dawson, which Maureen just reviewed. This is the property that most of you will recognize as the former High Road on Dawson. The Black family recently purchased the property, which is just up the street from their barbecue restaurant. And as a local family and a local business, they have been looking at ways to revitalize the existing building and reopen it as a gathering place for friends and neighbors. It's been there and operated as a club for like 70 years. I think it's important to mention here that the family envisions minimal disruptive construction. They're planning to keep the building and keep the existing on-site parking, and mainly focus on updating the existing structures to keep it as a nice, safe, enjoyable environment. We believe that this vision is consistent with the site's history as the Elks Lodge and High Road, and also respectful of the property's unique place in the neighborhood. However, there are current city rules, if we go to the next slide, that only allow nonprofit clubs on the property today, which would rule out the Black family since they operate as a family-run business. So as a result, the family has requested 2 changes that would allow them to operate it as a new club. The 2 requested changes are, number 1, the neighborhood plan amendment that Maureen just went over, and then number 2, a rezoning case, which we have now filed. Now, many of you are familiar already with these processes, but for those who may not be, the neighborhood plan, specifically something called the future land use map, or the FLUME, sets a very high level vision for future projects, while the zoning sets specific site regulations to implement that vision. So for example, the neighborhood plan might state that in the future, a property should become multifamily or commercial, and then the zoning is going to define what you can build on that site and operate there, and then what the setbacks are going to be and how high you can go. So in this case, the city has designated the property for future multifamily, and its zoning is still the single family SF3 district. So in other words, both of the city's current designations are pushing this property away from its historic use as a club. We are asking to address that by requesting a future designation for a mix of uses and for rezoning to CSMU, which is a zoning district that would allow more flexibility for the club going forward, including allowing the Black family to operate it as a family-run business, or family-run club, because that's the business that they want to operate there. So to put these cases in perspective, as you already saw from Maureen, here is the property, and here are the different neighborhood plan FLUM designations in the surrounding area. As you can see, there is civic and open space to the east. That's the, and then multifamily and mixed use to the north. And on Barton Springs, you can see that up there, the purple, and single family designations to the east and south. And then on our current, I guess I should say, I apologize, I just realized it's the open spaces to the west there. My bad, that's the green. And again, on our current designation is for multifamily, which is shown here as blue, and we are requesting mixed use. So as noted, the major reason for this is because current city rules prohibit the family from running the club. The current SF3 zoning only allows a very narrow exception for nonprofits to run clubs, and the current multifamily future land use map designation only allows us to request rezoning to a multifamily zoning district. So our request solves for these 2 barriers. I also believe it's important to note that the family is bringing these requests forward specifically because they want to take a direct, hands-on approach to managing the club and ensuring that everything is done right. Early on, they looked into what it would mean to try to qualify through the very narrow nonprofit exception that the High Road used, and they realized it would mean fully handing over the property and the running of the club to someone else so that they could manage and operate it, which meant they would not have the ability to be hands-on to ensure that things are done right or to proactively address issues. The 2 cases we brought forward will allow them to directly and proactively manage the club. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, the Black family is currently focused on keeping and revitalizing the existing structure and maintaining the existing parking, both of which you can see here on this aerial, and you can see the swimming pool too, right above the little red dot. I'll just close by outlining the case review process and the next steps, so everybody knows kind of the next steps. First, the family has worked to be proactive about meeting with neighbors and the Bouldin Creek Neighborhood Association, including talking to folks at a number of different meetings prior to even filing these applications. We also wanted to make sure that we were open and upfront with the surrounding neighbors about the case, and mailed out letters to immediately adjacent area to let folks know what the family was thinking. and invited everybody to a meeting so we could, the immediately adjacent neighbors, so that we could engage in some discussion. So at this point, we have filed both of our applications and are in staff review at the city. Once the city staff has a recommendation on the cases, they will bring them to the Planning Commission for a public hearing. And then at the Planning Commission, there's an advisory vote, whether to recommend with conditions or deny the request. After the Planning Commission, the case will go to City Council for another public hearing and a final vote on whether to approve. So I would also say for a lot of cases, the City Council vote is the final decision point. But in this case, a club is what the city calls a conditional use, which basically just means that we will have to come back to the Planning Commission for another public hearing and a vote on whether to allow the club use. So doing the future land use map and the zoning is not the end. There will be yet another public hearing where there'll be a site plan for everybody to review and comment on, and another vote at Planning Commission, whether to grant the club use. So that's really just to summarize and to say that the community is going to have additional layers of security to ensure that the club is done in a way that reflects what we've presented here. So that's the proposal we're bringing forward. And I think I'll pause at this point and just open it up, let Maureen and others tell us what to do next. But thank everybody for your time and for being here tonight and for letting me go through this.
Okay, thank you, Michael. This is Mark Walters, Planning Department. I'll be facilitating tonight's discussion. So I'm open to either the chat or raise your hand, and I will call on you in the order that your hand is raised. While we're waiting for that, would the person with the phone number 8989, do you have a question?
No, sir.
No. Okay. What about the person with the phone number 8423? Do you have a question?
No, thanks.
Okay. Well, Brett Rhodey has raised his hand. So would you unmute Brett and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for putting this on. Yeah, so Michael, we talked about this before, and the club idea sounds really cool. But what would prevent you from, once you have your CSMU zoning, why, if you weren't able to get the club, couldn't you still operate as a restaurant? Any of a number of other uses that fall under the CSMU zoning as allowed uses. So just curious about the fallback, or if potentially the club idea didn't work out, didn't, cash flow or whatever. What are the, kind of backstops for your client going forward from that point? Would they have to just shut down and, kind of stop the show, if you will, or would they move to another use that's allowed under CS?
Well, as you and I have discussed, Brett, and I've also discussed at length with folks that attended, the Bouldin Creek zoning committee meeting and others, I think there are uses that would make sense there. And obviously, multifamily would be an example. I think we had that discussion. So I think that can be managed through conditional uses related to the zoning that prohibit some uses and allow other uses. And I think we're going to have time between now and Planning Commission, which will be, I'm sure, several weeks, if not months away, to work on that with the community to identify the appropriate ones. I know for today's purpose, the focus is primarily on, it's a community meeting about changing the neighborhood plan from multifamily to mixed use. And appropriately, we should be talking about narrowing the types of uses that would be done at this location. For example, I know that the Black family doesn't have an interest in automotive repair or automotive related uses. So there's lots of, as you and I have talked about, conditional overlays that prohibit long lists of permitted uses. But similarly, to your point, I think allowing many of the residential uses, condominium, multifamily, would be appropriate. So I think that's something we would work out.
Yeah, so a restaurant use per se outside of a club or lodge would not be on the allowed use.
No, I think that's one we would want to talk about. I think there's, again, as we talked about, there might be a way to identify an appropriate limitation on size. I've seen that as a conditional overlay before, but I wouldn't, as I know others have seen, there are neighborhood restaurants which serve a valuable purpose for the community if they're done and sized appropriately. So I wouldn't say that immediately that's excluded from the list of things that might be possible.
Okay. Okay, next person up would be Judith Sims. If you could unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My question, I have a couple of questions. One would be, what is the size of the membership of this club? Do you anticipate?
I'm sorry, the size of the what?
Membership.
The membership.
Oh, I think at its height, and I might need Mark to chime in here. I thought at the height, the High Road had a membership of 700 or 750. What was their membership?
It's 750, Waylon. This is Mark Black. 750. We're definitely not going to start out at that. We anticipate it being much smaller and then being able to scale into what we see fit.
Do you anticipate any events that would, where all 700 people would come, plus their families? I ask this because I worked for many years across the street from Westwood Country Club. Of course, they had tennis courts and, swimming pools.
I would anticipate that a large number of people would want to be up here, for example, on July 4th. And there may be a Labor Day party and things like that where there would be large numbers of people, but regularly, no.
And I would emphasize, as Mark indicated, I don't see this being a situation where you're starting out with 750 members on day one. That is not, I don't think it's possible, but I don't think that's the family's interest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have a question for Michael? This is your opportunity here to ask questions.
Oh no, this is not their only opportunity.
No, this is
everybody on this call has my direct dial, my email.
I'm sure. No. This is an opportunity. Sometimes, for not everybody, but sometimes this is the first opportunity for some people to have questions. So please avail yourself of this opportunity. And any questions? You can, okay, Brett, could you ask your question, please?
Can't resist, Michael. Follow-up question. When are you guys going to have your conditional overlay language developed where, these issues could be reviewed? In other words, issues of limiting intensity and limiting membership, deliveries, odors, sound. How does all that work into a conditional overlay? So that's a big question. What does that language look like, and will city legal be amenable to having significant restrictions within a CO?
Yeah.
That's a
so-
big question.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes, yes, and yes. So the timing question, and then I'll answer specifically. I guess I need to turn, oh, shoot. There's somebody on here who is zoning case manager. So I guess I need to ask the zoning case manager kind of what their thought is in terms of staff report and timing of planning commission, because that'll help me know when I need to have some of these conditions outlined and done so that we can engage in a good conversation with the neighborhood prior to your deadline.
Yeah, because, CSMU zoning allows about 327,000 square feet of space to be built on the site with 60 feet of height, 95% impervious cover.
That's it.
So
Why don't we
doesn't sound like a
find out?
lot, but it's
I
an
know,
order of
Brett.
magnitude more than what you have there now. So
Yeah.
I'm just curious about what that FAR number would look like. And I mean, it'll be a pretty absurdly low FAR number if it's going to be representing what's on site today.
So
So
why don't we find out when? Is the case manager on? Is there a way to?
I don't think
Maureen?
he is.
No, the zoning case manager typically doesn't attend these meetings, so it'd have to be something we follow up with Michael Watson, who's the assigned case manager, later on.
And
Okay.
at the end of this presentation, you can have another opportunity to get his contact information.
Okay. So Michael Watson. So I'll find out. But to answer your question, as you know, Brett, because you've seen them, lots and lots of zoning cases have conditional overlays that are wide ranging and but mostly limited to things that are in 25-2. That's City Code Title 25-2, Article 2, which is the zoning, which has my apologies, site development regulations like Florida area ratio that Brett was just referencing, and setbacks, which I know, Brett, we've talked about, and uses, which I mentioned specifically, all of which are things that every week the city council votes on and approves zoning cases that have conditions associated with them. And this would be no different. We would expect the same thing here.
Does anybody else have a question for Michael Whalen this time? Bill Jeffers, would you please unmute Bill and ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My question is just a quick one. In the plans for the club, do you have any plans for outdoor music, live outdoor music?
So amplified sound is heavily regulated in Austin. And so you would have to get a permit. And
Okay.
two things are happening. One, there are limitations on how many decibels you can have at the property line under city code already. And if there is amplified music, you have to get a special permit to do that. Just because you get and I'll let Mark and Maureen confirm, but just because you get CS zoning or get the flume change, that does not give you an automatic right to amplified music, and it is not part of the plan. If there is amplified music, it would be occasional, and it would have to be done with a permit and with notice to neighbors. That's part of the process for doing that.
I live a little bit further up Dawson Road on South 5th, where it turns into South 5th. And we had a bar open on South Lamar Street several years ago that was going to have live music outdoors. And we had written into, I guess I'm not sure what it was, maybe someone at the city would know, but there was something written into their lease or their purchase of that space that they would not have live music outside. as part of their ability to open that bar, because it would have greatly impacted all the houses across from them on South Fifth and Dawson Road. So I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that's probably, the city doesn't regulate contracts or leases or restrictive covenants per se between private parties, so I'm
It
not
was a
aware.
restrictive, yeah, it was a restrictive covenant.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of that. If it's between the seller or someone out, unless the city is a party to it, then I really don't know too
Okay,
much.
thanks.
Mhm. Oh, does anybody else have any questions? No, because the meeting doesn't have to extend to its
Hi, I have a
allotted time.
question.
You bet.
Hi, I have a question. Sorry, I'm calling in. My name is Catherine Garza, and I live on Dawson Road. And I just had a concern. Well, my question is, and it could have already been addressed, but there's already a lot of cars that park on Dawson up to the 900 block. And I'm concerned, I don't know, is there going to be like, what kind of, will there be clauses about transportation or parking on the street, or because there's also road safety as it is, because you know, there are a lot of streets that are adjacent to us that have parking permits required signs, and so what happens is people park on Dawson, and so I'm concerned that if whatever happens to 700 Dawson, that the roads are going to again get more congested. So what is being addressed, or how will that be addressed?
Well, I can only comment about the site, and I'm going to ask Tom to maybe give everybody an update on a parking plan. I don't know the acronym or what it is, but maybe a quick update, Tom, for everybody about what the city is planning in terms of parking, because you obviously know more than that. But in terms of this site will have the required amount of parking per the city code. There's a certain amount that's required per city code for
Yeah, for use.
Yeah, for this use, yeah.
For per square footage, you have X amount of parking spaces for X amount of square footage, depending on what it is.
Yeah, and you can see here, this is a lot in this picture that is not being heavily utilized at this particular moment in time when this Google car was driving, and yet people were parking in the street. Our hope would be that,
yeah, that's what
people,
I'm worried about, because
yeah,
it is a big lot, because we were members of the High Road. Yeah, it is. They have two really big lots, but people were still parking on the street. And so
yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. I know how Terry Black's is right now, where there's a lot of tourists that go to the place, and then there are pedestrians that walk because they're intoxicated. They walk in the street, or there's also scooter issues, and like there's already scooter issues in this area. So I'm just like, I hope that somehow is also, I need to bring this to the Bouldin Creek Neighborhood Association, but I do think I'm just concerned that if there's like more commercial activity on our street, that then, there's just, this issue is just going to just keep getting worse.
Tom, I think, Tom, you might, as the president of BCNA, you might want to give folks an update on the parking stuff that I've heard you talk about, because I don't know the details.
Yeah, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tom.
Okay. This area is within the newly approved parking traffic management district. Dawson, as you know, has free parking basically in this area. Many of the streets have restricted permit parking only for residents at this point in time. The change of use, depending on the volume of use and so forth, probably will impact Dawson a bit more, certainly on traffic flow. We had looked at the possibility, and it's much further down the road yet. We haven't gotten to this point, but that stretch of road would be metered parking, digital metered parking, probably. But again, we have a very narrow road with lots of traffic coming up and down, and certainly the traffic impact at the intersection of Dawson and South First, Barton Barton Springs, it will have to be some consideration there. So it's a little early for us to say what would happen, but as residents bring this issue to BCNA, BCNA's representatives will take it to the Parking Traffic Management District discussions in the oversight group. And we'll certainly look to what we might be able to do on mitigation.
And there's a comment in the chat from Mary. I would love to see this facility be part of the community again. We were HR members and we miss it very much. So thank you for that, Mary. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, James Rutherford, would you please unmute and ask your question?
All right, unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I have a concern about the designation of a private club. I think that's an unfortunate, probably required term, but to me, it smacks of exclusivity. And that is totally the opposite of what the High Road was. It was a very inclusive club. So I'm really in the conceptualization of this facility as a club, would like to see it being inclusive and creating a space for people of a lot of socioeconomic backgrounds.
So Michael Whalen again, you are correct, James. It is a unfortunate use of the words that in the code, right? I mean, it says club or lodge is a conditional use. A private club or lodge is a conditional use versus a nonprofit. And I'll let Mark speak to their vision. Their vision is to have memberships that are available very much like the High Road, where this becomes I think, Mark, you've used the term part of the community's living room, so that there is that opportunity for the community to gather and get to know one another. I think, I mean, philosophically, we're better off when we are talking to one another as a community. So I know that's Mark. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, James, we agree. And this isn't a country club. We're very much aiming to have an inclusive club that has socioeconomic differences, and it's meant to be the living room of the neighborhood. So we're in agreement, and we know the BCNA and other charity organizations had meetings here and all that, and that's what we intend to do with it. So we agree.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So does anybody else have any questions of the applicant at this time? Yes, Brett.
Yeah, Michael, follow up number 2. So there wouldn't be anything that would lock you into operating it as a private club, right? I mean, you could try that out. You could decide, well, this isn't working out for whatever reason. We don't want to do it. We're not, we're losing money, whatever. You wouldn't need to come back to the neighborhood to get permission to end the private or club or lodge designation to operate as a commercial operation within the list of uses, which would include restaurant. There would be nothing to, no procedure, no permission that you would need to end your club or lodge operation. Is that correct?
Well, you would have to do a change of use. So you have to file. You wouldn't have to go to the neighborhood. That's correct. You would have to do a change of use with the city. And as I stated earlier, we can put certain conditions on the size of those uses for a restaurant. So restaurant seems to be a theme here, and certainly whether it's Thai, fresh, or other restaurants in the community that offer a valuable service, I think there's certain ways that we can work on that in the conditional overlay. So to answer your question, no, you wouldn't go back. You wouldn't have to go back if it was only if it was one of those permitted uses and not a
Right,
prohibited use. You're going to have a much, so my sense, Brett, from conversations with you and others is that the list of prohibited uses will drown the list of permitted uses. I think the prohibited uses are going to be an ocean, given everybody's feedback, and the number of permitted uses is going to be much more narrow. So,
Understood,
I-
but I think if you came and said, we're gonna move Terry Black's barbecue up here, which I know you're not talking about doing, but if you did do that, I don't know that you'd have a lot of support for it, because I think the intensity would be well over and above what anybody has in their envision right now when they think back about the Elks Lodge or the High Road.
yeah,
So I think
Terry,
that's the issue.
the Black family has been very clear. This is, first of all, it's owned, and it will be owned by the children. Yes, they work in as part of the Terry Black's barbecue operation, but they absolutely do not have any plans, do not want Terry Black's to be up in the High Road. They've been very clear about that.
Sure, of course, and that's all fine and well, but property changes hands, and zoning runs with the land, right? So
It
you
does.
could easily transfer the land to somebody else who says, well, we want to do something totally different. We're going to make this project really profitable for us. So we'll do whatever we need to do.
Brett, this is Mark Black, with the club component, there is going to be a restaurant and pool, food served here. So there is going to be a food component. That's a part of this already.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But I think when I'm just thinking about my neighbors, thinking about, wow, wouldn't it be great to have this small, pretty modest private, we'll call it what you want, club that's just for us neighbors. But in reality, you could, or someone else could decide, look, we don't want to do that anymore. We're going to ramp up and have a great big restaurant, whatever operation, a Bouldin Acres, a beer garden, AEGB. We got 3.7 acres, and we can really expand this and make it very profitable. So that might not be you, might not be your family, but it could be somebody else after you. So I think
Okay. I mean,
going back to the limitations, I think that's where, for us, it's like, I'm really a little bit skeptical that you can work the zoning to put such, large limits on the zoning on CSMU, which is, like I said, allows under the zoning 327,000 square feet. So it's to me, it'll be very interesting to see how that looks and whether that would actually be amenable to you for future, because now you're putting quite a limitation on a very expensive piece of property.
Yeah, no, and we're only looking for 326,000 square feet and about 120 feet of
Okay.
height. So we should be okay.
Right.
No, seriously, Brett, I mean, you've seen conditional overlays that limit square footage and FAR, and I think that's, although this is a community meeting about the future land use map, I want to be respectful with the question. And I've told you and Tom and other members that this is the issue, is being sure that we take the ocean of uses and be sure to narrow it down. You've seen all the zoning cases that have, 20, 30 prohibited uses and, a handful, maybe 10 permitted uses. And that's what I expect this is going to look like, similar to those. So this is so solvable and definitely will be prior to, again, I know this is just the community meeting for the plan amendment, but certainly prepared to engage in exactly this type of discussion with you, which is specific about the massing and form of the structure. Easy to put in there because those are site development regs. I do want to
Right,
add,
but you have 12,000 square feet plus or minus, maybe it's a little bit less on site now. And so, that's for us, that's a big restaurant right there. So if you compare that to your current operation on Barton Springs Road, significantly larger. So even with the current square footage with no FAR increase or no, maybe the thing is limited to 12,000 square feet as opposed to 327,000, it still could become quite an intense commercial food and beverage operation. So anyway, I just, I think a lot of us remember the high road and how, there may be 50 people there at any given time. And it was quite a, little cozy neighborhood operation, but that was a nonprofit that had paid no property tax and, probably lost money most of the time. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
So we
is that
have
a promise?
Billy,
Yeah,
okay, we have Billy 900 Bouldin. If you have a question for Michael, please unmute. And then I'm going to go through the chat and then come back to Kay Schultz. So Billy 900 Bouldin, please unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hey, I was wondering if you could comment anything on what the dues might look like, or maybe ballpark it, or give us any kind of hint about what you're thinking.
Mark, do you want to?
Sorry, I was on mute. This isn't going to be a Soho House or a Commodore Perry, so we want to make it for affordable for the people in the neighborhood. And I think it kind of depends on the zoning that we get and ultimately what we decide to do up here in terms of how much we want to remodel each portion of it.
And the comment from Jody Zimmel in the chat. How does a commercial zoning district fit this definition from the LDC? And in quote, club or lodge use is the use of a site for provision of meeting, recreational or social facilities by a private or nonprofit association, primarily for use by members and guests. This use includes private social clubs and fraternal organizations.
I think I paid 150.
So,
I was grandfathered in, I think it went up to like
okay,
3 something.
Maureen, you see your Firefox.
A year.
So. So you're pulling this up. Okay, thank you, Maureen. It's at the end of the
Yeah,
document.
it's at the very end of the guide.
You'll never get there by trying to page down. Just grab the little gray bar and pull it down. No. It might go a little faster. While Maureen's pulling that up, Kay Schultz, you please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good evening. I had a couple questions. Is it your intention that the restaurant be open just to members of the club or open to the public? And number two, did I hear you say that the use for this property allows 95% impervious cover, or did I mishear that?
It said that the CS zoning does allow up to 75% impervious cover.
Or it's 95%. Sorry.
90%. Wow. Nobody with residential zoning can do that.
We have a survey, Mark. It has a considerable amount, but I don't know what it is because it doesn't go down the hill, so I don't know the exact amount. But everybody you've seen from the aerials earlier, the part that's there on the top is pretty much all impervious cover, that whole parking area. Yeah, you can see it's got quite a bit of impervious cover.
I'll chime in. The restaurant's for the members only, so similar to what was happening up here before. And obviously, you see the heritage oaks on there. We will not touch one of those trees.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mark, that's a really good point. There are when you can have an X amount of impervious cover that's your maximum allowable, but there are other rules and regulations in the code that are referred to as site constraints. It means you just can't build there, and one of those is the steep slopes. You're not allowed to build on steep slopes. And another one is heritage trees. You aren't allowed to knock down a heritage tree without city council permission. So there's lots of other constraints that are going to ensure that there's a green space, if you will, pervious coverage on the site.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions? Or those are the steep slopes, Maureen?
Sorry, I just wanted to add that, Mr. Black, I don't accuse you of wanting to do anything bad to the trees, but it happens in this neighborhood all the time. Someone comes and cuts them down without asking, and the fine is not very much.
Now we understand, and we've had arborists out here, and we think that the trees add value to the experience in the place. So yeah, we're very sensitive to that too.
So does anyone else have any questions? Yes, Jody, please unmute and ask your question.
So I have to ask this question. If you don't make enough money by selling memberships to this club, and if it's too expensive for the neighborhood because it costs so much to run this property as a club, what's your backup plan?
Jody, we don't need to make money. We bought this property as really a legacy property, and we have no plans of ever selling this property. So
even if you lose all the money that you put into it because you can't get enough members, you're just gonna live with that.
Yes, ma'am. That's currently what's happening now. I mean, it took us a year to get to the point where we said, okay, we're going to go through this. So I think we're fortunate enough to be in a situation where no matter what, we're not going to sell this property.
Any other question?
Into anything else?
What's that?
And if this doesn't work out, like 10 years from now, and you have like commercial zoning, I'm concerned about what could happen to the property. And not that you would sell it, but you might turn it into something else because it's Austin and it costs a lot to have property here. And I know you guys have a big bank account, but the fact that it's commercially zoned leads me to think that it could be used as a lot of other things.
Yeah, I think that's where the prohibited uses will come into effect, Jody. And being sure that the small list of permitted uses is one that, everybody's comfortable with. Actually, Maureen, you were showing the steep slopes. That might be helpful for Kay's question about site restraints and how the buildable area is pretty limited. If you can put on the slope one again, I thought that was pretty amazing. Shame on me. I didn't realize how bad it was.
It's environmental, I think.
Yeah. But that might just help Kay. You remember when I said, Kay, there's certain, you can't build, there you go. So all that, what does the legend say on that? Because some of that, the really dark orange is particularly steep.
I think the orange is up to 15% and the light orange is up to 15. and the dark orange is greater than.
So-
Or the other way around, but it's,
But this
there's
is
no,
property.
there's no
That's,
legend.
Greenbelt. This is his property in here, and that's the only slope there at the end of the swimming pool. Oh, this is slope right here, yeah.
Can you zoom out just a notch? Green. There we go. And what is the legend? It's 60% or greater is the orange, so. Okay, thank you, Maureen. Brett, yeah, if you have another
Yeah,
question.
I'm looking at this. Michael, would you and your client be willing to limit the area of construction future through this CO to areas that are 15% or greater?
I'd have to sit down and figure that out. That'd be, I just have to sit down and figure that out. Because there are, as you know, well, I might need to hire you to help me since you've had to deal with slopes
Yeah,
as a premier architect.
Well, it's not impossible to build on some slopes. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a pretty complicated calculation that civil engineers are usually in charge of, but just because you have this 15% doesn't mean you can't build on it. And you
Right.
can move trees, you can move heritage trees. We all know that too. So you've
That's
got
right.
flexibility to develop this site. You may not have plans to do that now, but the potential is very great. And the views off the site from a higher, from higher floors, if you're going to 60 feet, are, well, let's just say that's worth a lot of money to somebody. Maybe not you guys, but there will be people that'll come knock on your door offering you a lot of money.
And the light orange is 15 to 60%, so that's a pretty big range. So we don't know what that exactly is. It's not a very granular map. Did the person who just joined us by phone, do you have a question or is it a rejoin?
We're a rejoin. We just got
Okay.
our calls. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to say, make sure you have an opportunity. So 7 o'clock, meeting scheduled to 7:30, but does anybody else have any questions this time? And you have Michael Whalen's contact information in the chat. And Maureen, you want to get the slide up with yours and the zoning case manager's contact information and kind of go over from your side. I know Michael went over what the process will be from here on out, but what's your part in the process and what do you expect people to do or find out?
So the next steps for our side is I will meet with my planning team. We'll make a recommendation on the flum change. I'll report back to them the questions and comments from this meeting. We'll look at the neighborhood plan, the comp plan, and we will then forward our recommendation to the zoning team. They will meet and make a recommendation on the proposed zoning request. Once we finalize staff recommendation, we'll start looking at planning commission and city council dates. We'll work with Bouldin Creek Planning Contact Team and anyone who's at this meeting, whether you're neighbor association or just a adjacent property owner. You can reach out to us and we can start probably in a couple of weeks, reach out to us and we can probably give you an idea of any proposed dates that we're looking at. Then we will work with the planning contact team and neighborhood association and other people who want to submit comments to be included in the staff case reports that go before planning commission and city council. Like I said, we don't have any prospective dates at this time, but certainly reach out to me in the next couple weeks and I may be able to give you an update of some sort.
And also all your any comments, emails with the emails redacted, any mailed in letters or anything will be included in the staff report that will be given to the city council and the planning commission. So Michael, looks like we're wrapping up. Do you have any final parting words for the people who came out tonight?
No. Just a huge thank you. I mean, I think the feedback's exactly what we need. I do have one question, Maureen, just so people know in terms of timing and emails, because people, I think there's going to be, I want to be really optimistic, a groundswell of support once we work through these conditional overlays. They don't need to get emails to you until much closer to a hearing that'll be posted, and so I'm just trying to get in terms of timing, when very roughly do you think that might be?
So once we settle on a planning commission date, which would be the first public hearing, we would need at the latest to be included in staff case reports, any comments a week before that hearing. So the Tuesday before that Tuesday planning commission date. So like I said, once we finalize a date, I can reach out to the Bouldin Creek Planning Contact Team. And people who have attended this meeting, you have my email. Again, you can touch base with me and in the next couple weeks, and I might have a prospective date. Did that answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
think
so.
that helps.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Planning Commission, they meet on the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month at City Hall Chambers. So before we sign off, Jody, you have another question?
Yes, I do. My understanding is that the planning contact team still has to hold their own meeting. This is not their meeting, and they have to be able to weigh in before you go to planning commission. Is that correct?
Ideally.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
was
they
gonna
have
say,
to weigh in, and they usually have to have a meeting,
Mhm.
and this is not that meeting.
No,
Correct.
this is, yeah, correct.
Well, I was
Okay.
just gonna say that we'll between the city and Michael, we can work with the planning contact team, but at some point, I'm not saying the planning contact team would do this, but at some point the cases would need to move forward. So we can work with y'all on whenever you might have a prospective date and go from there.
Well, no, I'm not in charge of the contact team. I'm just, making a point that all these things can happen, but the contact team still needs to weigh in on the plan amendment. And they typically hold a meeting and discuss it.
Okay.
So this is not, I just want people to be clear, this is not that
Oh,
meeting.
no,
You're
this is
here.
not that meeting. This is an
Yeah.
informational meeting required by
Code.
25-1, Article 16.
It's okay, Mark, I know.
I know, but not everybody knows that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jody. So hearing no other questions, we can end a little early tonight and get back to our normally scheduled lives. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, and I wish everybody a good evening.
Ready to come in?
Yep,
Thank
thank
you.
y'all. Thank you.
So this goes next to city council,
No, planning
planning
commission.
commission, and then city council.
Yeah, well, but it's got to